you're set, and you don't need to do anything. So welcome to the Tuesday, September the 4th, meeting of the Montpelier Design Review Committee. For anybody who's not here, been here before, we are advisory to the Development Review Board. We will listen to people's applications, vote on them, and move them forward. I will let staff and members introduce themselves.
Liz Pritchett, Meredith Crandall, staff.
Stephen Everett.
Eric Gilbertson.
And unless anybody has anything to add, do I hear a motion to approve
So
the
moved.
agenda?
Second.
All in favor of the agenda, raise your hand. And we will move to the first application for 39 Northfield Street. Andrea Cohen and Matt Chapman to construct landing and stairs. Come forward and have a seat. And introduce yourself.
My name is J.C. Myers, Myers Construction. I'm
Okay.
a carpenter, builder, hired to extend the stairway or the steps, create a landing and some stairs so that they can get to the street in an alternative way than the current situation, which is a pile of gravel. Probably get pretty slick in the winter.
As I mentioned to Eric earlier, this project is basically spurred by the city's changes to the city sidewalk levels. They brought that down, so then they had to bring the parking area down. And so the city dumped the pile of gravel, so there was some sort of access. But now you need something that is gonna actually work.
So it's pretty simple. It's a 3x3 landing built out of pressure-treated material. We are going to go with the same, the current stairway has a, they've basically sandwiched the lattice work between, and it has a top, just has a 15-degree beveled top rail. There's, I think, photos of close-ups of the actual rail. So we're going to do that. It's going to have a railing down the steps. It's going to, we're going to pour a paver at the bottom of the steps, sidewalk paver. And as near as I can calculate at this point, because really, I mean, it's pretty, I know where the landing's going to be, but I don't know, there's a lot of ledge and stuff in there. So, there may be, it's hard to say exactly where the stairs are going to land. It could be within, but no, within a foot or two. My point really is only that if I do approach the sidewalk with the paver and it actually does reach the sidewalk, then I'll put an expansion joint in there between that and the sidewalk. And of course, the paver will meet the specifications of the city, 3 to 4 inch.
You're not going to cover it, are you?
No, no cover.
rest of it's
No, it's
covered.
just a stair and an open landing, no cover. Yep.
He's got to walk a long ways to shovel his front steps.
Yeah, that's quite a stairway. I did some work on that house last summer, and I went up and down those stairs many times carrying compressors, and there's no other way besides up and down those stairs. It's
I
a,
assume the treads will be solid?
yeah, everything's they'll be, 2 by,
Right.
yeah, 2 by, probably 2 by 6,
It-
probably make them pretty comfortable stairs, 6 inch, 12 inch treads and 6 inch
Yep.
risers.
Had you
Built
thought
on.
Had you thought of using any of the steel grate treads?
That's a possibility. This is what the customer wanted. She wanted
Okay.
to see it pressure treated, so, but I would be, happy to suggest it to
pricier,
her, see if
but
she, yeah,
You never have to
Yeah.
shovel them.
yeah.
We could put that in as an alternate, and you can talk
And
to
again-
him
At the
about
option of the homeowner.
Steve
Yeah.
uses about a lot of his buildings,
Yep.
so you don't have to shovel the snow.
So pre-assembled stairs or just the
No.
treads themselves?
You just order the tread, you can get them from Capital Steel. They're a little pricier now because of the tariffs.
They designed to go right on a 2x12 stringer, like a cutout stringer?
You don't even have to cut them out. You can do, they have some that you just use a solid stringer, which makes it more
Yeah.
sturdy.
Yeah,
And then the tread comes with, the side is about 1.25 inches with 2 slots. You just put carriage bolts through and bolt them right into the side of a solid
I'll
stringer.
look into it. They might,
And they're very rugged.
Yep.
And we've had icicles fall on them. We've had everything beat the bejesus out of them. And
Mm-hmm.
I haven't had to shovel stairs in
Yeah.
10 years, and I haven't shoveled once. And that was usually,
they're not slippery in the wintertime? No?
No, you get galvanized and they
Yeah.
have a little,
Little, like, cork,
texture.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
it's like it's ridged.
Yeah.
And the snow and ice goes right through.
Where are you getting those?
Car steel.
Car steel?
Car steel, Montpelier,
It's capital steel. isn't it?
Capital Steel, I guess they
Capital,
call it. Everybody used to call it cars. Capital Steel down in the 3 Mile at Junction
Oh, yeah.
Road.
Yeah,
Like you're gonna go to the train station,
Yeah.
as soon as you make the right turn there, they're on the left.
yeah.
Again, they're a little pricier, but, if you need 5 or 6 of them, you don't have to ever worry about.
Well, you're gonna pay some for labor to cut out those stringers too, and cut all your treads. So there might be some, I don't know, it might be comparable.
Worth taking a look at.
Yeah, I'll go-
And
I'll
they
check it
last-
out.
The other thing is beating snow and ice off of wood treads.
Yeah.
Invariably, you beat them to death.
Yeah,
I've found that if they lasted 5 or 6 years after you took a hatchet and beat the
Yeah.
snow and ice off of them,
Yeah.
after about 4 or 5 years, you had to replace them anyway.
I was
Not very good for barefoot.
facilities director for the Central Vermont Community Land Trust for 6 years. And what we used to do with wooden steps is we'd put a rubber mat on them, a textured rubber mat to protect them.
Yes, no, that helps a lot.
And so that would be another, option. I think you're making a good point here that they will take a pounding.
And I've
But a
saved-
2x will take quite a pounding before it completely
Just with the
disintegrates.
steel treads, I probably saved in excess of $500 a year shoveling expense.
Just going, because it's so quick.
Well, you don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
The snow and ice just goes right through.
Yep.
I mean, never shoveled. Didn't shovel once, not once. in
I'll
10
suggest it to
years.
her, for sure.
And again, you don't have to.
And if it's approved, it's pre-approved, then we don't
just-
have to come back and,
Just as an option.
yep. Sounds like a good one.
Any other comments, questions, suggestions?
Those stairs are no good if you go barefoot, though, probably.
Well,
If you go barefoot
they definitely
in the
make an
city,
impression.
I think if you go barefoot in the city, you're taking your chances as it is.
Well, you might get a indentation as opposed to splinters.
Yeah.
If you can handle the sidewalks and then you probably handle the steps, gravel driveways.
So again, we can leave that as an option.
Okay.
The landing itself could even be steel. We've
Yeah.
done landings as well as stairs with steel.
I'm gonna leave a few of my cards, so, in case, I do a lot of like renovation and repair,
Right.
so,
Thank you.
oh,
By the way,
Yeah,
the
so
steel,
we have to
the
share
steel comes as either a painted steel
yeah,
or raw steel or
Right.
galvanized. And the
Yeah.
galvanized doesn't rust.
right, it's forever.
It's forever.
And there could be, the limitation could be the cost. I would imagine they're pretty pricey, but we'll
Again,
see, I'll check it out,
you
the
look
price,
at
and
it,
see what
look
she
at it,
says.
Look at it.
The overall value of the
Against-
material might be worth it, the
look at it-
lifetime cost wouldn't
Look
be
at it
as high.
against
Yeah.
maintenance.
Well,
Yeah.
especially with the stairs coming right down to where the city plows, because I know that's why you bumped the stairs back from the sidewalk.
Yeah.
Because the city was concerned
Yeah,
about the city plow beating up the stairs.
yeah,
That
no,
might
I
help
think
a
we'll
little
be
bit,
well
too.
back from the sidewalk. Even the little sidewalk plow won't have a problem there, we'll keep it back from the sidewalk. I think the stairs are gonna land probably 3 or 4 feet, or 4 feet from the sidewalk. That's just from looking at them, I think that. And we want a nice comfortable tread and riser, so it's
Yep.
easy to walk up the steps.
Yep.
But we can steepen it a little bit if it looks like it's gonna impede on or where it's gonna make snow removal difficult.
Yeah.
We won't do that.
So anyway, there's a set of criteria, and I'll just read through them. And it says preservation or reconstruction of the appropriate historic style of the proposed projects in the historic district or involves an historic structure. This proposal is acceptable. Harmony of exterior design with other properties in the district, acceptable. Compatibility of proposed exterior materials with other properties in the district acceptable. Compatibility of proposed landscaping, none proposed in this application. Prevention of the use of incompatible designs, buildings, color schemes, or exterior materials acceptable. Location and appearance of all utilities. Any additional lighting proposed for the stairs?
None.
Okay. None proposed.
There is a, if you look at I think there's some photographs of the bottom of the stairs there.
Mhm.
If you look at that, there's the steps continue off for about 2 feet to the right of the stair, and there's a little box, like a little closet type container.
Mhm.
That's all gonna be removed.
Okay.
So the steps will come out, so we can rail, because they'll be on the other side of the rail anyway,
Yep.
once the rail's there. So
Okay.
that part will be removed.
No, that's fine. The other thing, you can add it at a later date if you need to. They make some little solar lights that go out
Yeah.
so that.
Little LEDs.
after- They're LEDs.
Yeah.
And after sunset, they'll light up the treads and the platform. If they want to add something like that, that's not an issue. Recognition of and respect for view quarter and significant vistas, including gateway views of the city and State House, acceptable. And again, the option was the stair landing and stair treads may be either pressure-treated wood construction or galvanized steel grating at the option of the applicant. All in favor of the application with that option, raise your hand.
Thank you.
And I'll let you sign that above my name on the lower left there. Okay, thank you.
All right.
And you are J.C. Myers.
I am J.C. Myers.
M-E-Y-E-R-S.
It's M-Y-E-R-S.
M-Y-E-R-S, okay.
Yep. Okay, thank you. So is there a, I know it goes to,
That's gonna go back to planning. and
Right.
Audra will issue a permit.
Okay, so do I need to be at that as well? Okay,
Nope.
all right.
Nope, there's no other hearings.
Okay.
And this shouldn't, there's no big issues, so this should be.
Okay.
clear out in the next
All right.
days.
So and there's no delay between the issuing of the permit and the actual construction start time?
There's a appeal period, I think, on this, it's a few days, but.
Few days, okay,
Not
that's
that
great.
long.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Good luck with your
Thank you.
project.
Thanks.
Yeah, the notice with the permit will give you the details.
Great, thanks.
And we don't have anybody for 149 Main Street. Audra's been handling this one, so I'm not sure who's supposed to be here exactly. I'm assuming it's these two meets. I'm gonna run downstairs real quick and check my email to see if
Okay,
we got a lead email on something.
no, go right ahead.
I didn't have much question about this one either.
No.
Me either.
It's very inconspicuous, tucked in behind.
Sure. Is it going where that tank is, right there now? Propane tank, it's in the general
Another
vicinity.
picture, they must be gonna remove that.
Right, and put, I think that's for the generator. Looks kind of nice back there. Nice lawn.
Looks like generator's gonna be around the corner on the side, but I assume they'll remove the tank. Well, they'll have to, because that's the location of the generator.
They're gonna bury the tank, aren't they?
Oh, I think so. Yes, a new underground propane tank.
New 500-gallon propane tank below grade
Oh.
to supply the new generator. Plus, anything else in the building, I assume that they have that's gas.
Well, gas is really good for generators because it doesn't go bad.
Those gas-powered generators are great.
Yeah.
I've had people install a couple of those. People live off the grid. One person was in Colberg, New Hampshire, way up on a hill, and he checked with the power company to see how much it would run to power lines from where they ended a half a mile down the road, and it was going to be somewhere between about $80,000. And so what he did was he installed one of those, it was a generator. It was powered by a little Honda motor. He put that up there, and he had a 1,000-gallon tank for heat. It's a secondary home, but a 1,000-gallon tank for LP.
Huh?
And it's for heat, refrigerator, stove, heating, and the generator.
Well, you could
And
you can use a lot smaller generator now if you get one of those Tesla batteries.
Mm-hmm.
You can charge it up, you can put solar in, and then the generator only comes on when you need it.
So
You can
between
put some pretty
between-
neat systems in now.
Yeah. He didn't have the Tesla, but between the solar panel and the generator to supply all of his electricity when he was there, and everything was efficient inside, LED lighting, LED television, and, he filled up the tank with LP, a 1,000-gallon tank, and after 2 years, he asked the guy to come back and deliver it, and the guy came up and delivered 200 gallons of propane. He said, "Don't call me for 4 more years."
Which one? That's funny. This goes till usually at least a little after 6, but then there's a 7 o'clock.
Yeah, you can put together with the LED stuff, and
Okay.
you can put together some pretty
Okay.
sophisticated thing. I have a friend that just, runs his generator when he's doing laundry
Mhm.
and stuff like that. So he put in a smaller system, and he just runs the generator when he's, doing something that uses a lot of electricity.
Oh,
No emails?
no emails. I
So
can try and call them if you want. See what's going on. Ooh. That's something back. Or
we can just move it to the next
continue
meeting.
it. Yeah. Do you want me to try and give them a call to see if they're on their way, or just continue it? I'm fine just continuing it.
Let's just
Doesn't-
continue it. I mean,
Yeah.
this is not anything that is time sensitive, and I'm almost willing to say, we could approve it without people here, but I don't think we should do that, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think somebody should either show up or let us know that, there's an
Yeah.
issue and
Yeah.
ask if we could approve it without their presence.
Yeah.
And again, it's pretty straightforward. I don't think we have any,
It's not like something
issues
where I've
with it.
brought something in extra. This is the whole
and it doesn't
application.
sound like it's any emergency situation.
No.
Okay,
I
so
think
we'll
continue.
move that forward.
Yeah.
And has everyone looked at the August 20th minutes?
Yep. I'll move them.
All in favor of the minutes, raise your hand. Minutes are approved. And I'll leave this with you. That's the form for the 149 Main.
Well, we will recycle those.
And does anybody else have anything to offer at this point in time?
Nope.
Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Second, all in favor of adjournment, raise your hand. Meeting is adjourned. Thank
Good.
you.
Thank you, yes.
Flipped right through that one.
Yeah. I'm feeling
That
like
was an easy one.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to call this meeting to order for the City of Montpelier Development Review Board. My name is Dan Richardson. I am the chair, and the other members to my right are
Rob Goodwin.
Kevin O'Connell.
Deb Markowitz.
Meredith Crandall, staff.
Kate McCarthy.
Tom Kester.
Okay, and we have a new microphone placement, so that'll take some getting used to. The first order of business is approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda or any additions that people wish to make? Okay, motion by Kevin. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Deb. All those in favor of the agenda as printed, please raise your right hand. We have an agenda. It's okay, let's count. There are no comments from the chair this evening, but the next item is the minutes from the August 20th meeting. In attendance were myself, Kevin, Kate, Tom, and Rob, who are eligible to vote. Do I have a motion for the minutes or any addendums that people wish to make? Yes, Kate.
I would like to make a spelling correction on page 2. Charlie Hahn is Hone, H-O-H-N instead of H-A-H-N, just to make sure we've identified him correctly. Other than that, they look very good.
And I'll note that it was spelled, I think, correctly further up the page.
That's correct.
Yeah, we
So
missed one.
All right.
there were not two Mr. Holmes that evening.
No.
All right. So with that correction, do I have a motion to approve the minutes? Motion by Kevin. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Rob. All those in favor of the minutes that are eligible to vote, please raise your right hand. The minutes are approved with the addendum. That brings us to the first item on our agenda of business this evening, and that is 1 Granite Street. If the applicants for 1 Granite Street are here, please come forward. Could you state your name for the record, please?
Peter Merrill.
So, Mr. Merrill, I'm going to actually put you under oath because we're going to take testimony. So if you raise your right hand, the other right, you solemnly swear or affirm that the evidence and testimony you're about to give for the matter under consideration shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, under the pains and penalties of perjury.
I do.
Very good. So, let's start out. We're actually going to have Meredith, our zoning administrator, give us a brief overview of what we're looking at tonight, and then Peter, I'll have you give some testimony in support of your application.
Okay.
So this is a request for minor site plan and conditional use approval for 1 new art studio and the expansion of a current art studio in the building, which is 1 Granite Street, the National Clothespin Factory building. And the space right now is former manufacturing space. That's what it's classed as. And the big issue for the board is the authorizing the conditional use. That's why this come before you. Art studio is not a listed use in the regulations. So you'll see in your packet that I have included a determination that art studio is closest to light manufacturing in this instance. And then you go from that to the conditional use criteria, which are outlined starting on the bottom of page 13 in the staff report. So that's the big issue. And then there's some questions about parking, bicycle storage, and landscaping. But the big one is the conditional use.
So, Peter, why don't you tell us about this?
Excuse me?
Why don't you tell us about this application?
Well, I have 2 potential tenants that have seen a 2nd floor, which was formerly manufacturing. And they're looking for an art studio. It's about 900 feet, faces Granite Street with 6 windows that way and a couple windows facing southwest. They just kind of like the ambience of the old building. We're not trying to change anything. We're not changing windows. It's got old hardwood flooring. It's typically what you see in a manufacturing building. We got to do some retrofits, insulation in the walls, which is non-existent. And we may change a heating system for that area. That's about it.
And just to be clear, this art studio, would this be any type of show or retail space?
No, it's for two artists, and they're not going to have the public in any way.
Where is the parking going to be for these spaces?
Meredith figured it out.
Well, how much existing parking is available that's not otherwise committed to either existing tenants or?
Well, there's a lot of combinations. We have shared parking. Some uses of the building are only there for, 15 hours a week. I rent spaces to the Hunger Mountain Co-op, which can go away when we really need parking for 8 hours a day for a couple of people. I mean, there's a lot of choices.
Where in particular, though? I'm just, and maybe Meredith can help you
Do you want a copy of the parking plan that you gave me?
Yeah.
So we're all looking at the same. Yeah. So, and I added.
Yeah, so one of the spots would probably be either number 12 or number 13. And the other one would probably be maybe 20 or number 1.
And those parking spaces aren't otherwise spoken for by
One of them
tenants.
is a rental for Hunger Mountain Co-op. Like I said, that can go away. The other parking is more or less shared parking. The 19, 18, 17, 16, that is shared parking for the movement center on the 3rd floor. Like I said, during normal hours, 7 to 5 o'clock at night, they probably only there for 15 or 20 hours a week.
Okay. I mean, my concern is I just want to make sure that we're not double counting parking spaces.
Right.
That, you're
Right.
not, I know you rent to Claire Construction, that you're not
Right.
giving them spaces that you're now counting.
Yeah, let me
for this.
explain that. Actually, one of the potential artists is a member of the movement center. So she would be using one of those spots when she is at the 3rd floor. She's one of the teachers on the 3rd floor.
Right. But I mean, the problem is that we can't just look at who the specific tenant is going to be, because that tenant may fall through and have another artist friend of hers who's not part of the movement center
Right.
would need that parking space. So you're identifying parking space 1 and parking space 12 as the likely.
Right. And to satisfy you, we could get rid of 2 Hunger Mountain Co-op spots.
How many spaces, Meredith, are we requiring again?
Let me go back. So, based on my calculations from the regulations as to how much is required based on the uses, the intensity of uses that I identified, they only are required to have 9 off-street parking spaces.
That's total for the building?
Total for the building, based on the two of the studios not having any customer traffic, the Clar Woodworking Shop and 3rd Floor Art Studio having minimal customer traffic, and the Movement Center having high visitor turnover. And then there's also a commercial office showroom with limited customer traffic, because these aren't places where you've got people coming in and out nonstop like Allen Lumber.
Right.
And so that works out to 9 off-street parking spaces required. Now, the parking spaces 1 and then 16 through 20, we can't count those as off-street because they're actually in the public right of way. So that leaves them with, I think what, did I say 13? Yeah. That leaves them with 13 off-street parking spaces. How they actually divvy them up, how they're actually divvied up is really
Right.
kind of up to them.
Okay. So, I mean, I guess I'm less concerned about the idea of renting out these parking spaces if nobody's using them. But for purposes of zoning, making sure that we have these minimum numbers as required.
Right.
I mean, you obviously want to provide parking spaces to your tenants because that's how you retain your tenants.
Right.
If they need the parking spaces, but at the same time, I mean, we're not suggesting that you need to assign a parking space and not use it, or it's just that for purposes of zoning, as long as the tenant
Right.
needs it.
Right.
They would have the right. Okay, let's, so you're anticipating these would just be these two artists coming, no commercial foot traffic, no, I mean, it would be essentially almost more like an office that they would come
Yes.
in, do their painting or artwork, and then depart.
Right, no shows. I mean, that's what they told me. That was the question, really.
Well, that's why I want to understand, I think in part because one of the first questions we have to, besides the parking, we need to know the traffic. And so, based on your representation that this is not a retail or commercial space, that these are really, at most, 2 tenants, at most 2 car trips per tenant
Right.
per day. So that we can understand that vehicle flow. And I simply wanted to get you on the record to represent that as part of it.
Right.
The next issue I wanted to ask about, unless someone has another question about traffic or parking. Some horses don't need to be hit anymore. Bicycle access. What kind of bicycle access does this site have?
Don't have a formal bicycle access. People they come on a bike on occasion. We don't have a designated building for them. They've put them into an entryway that we have on not Stonecutter's Way side, or not Granite Street side, but opposite number 13, where number 13 is. There's a fire tower there that accesses the 3 floors. There's a space in there adjacent to the stairs where people have put bikes. I mean, we don't have anything formal, but people have brought bikes before. So that would be inside. There's several places outside where railings, metal railings, or a bike could be connected to that, so it would be secure. That's what we have. We didn't have any zoning to tell us to put bike access in. Just people had bikes, they came and they used the space. And
So do your tenants currently some of your tenants currently have bicycles?
no, I mean, I'm just going back 10 years. On occasion, you'd see somebody with a bike and it would be tied up to a railing. It wasn't in the way, it wasn't in a parking spot.
But you're also saying that you've permitted tenants to bring in bikes inside?
It wasn't an issue. I mean, we weren't told to have a bike place
No,
like we are now.
And to be clear, part of this is it's not required now. However, the reason I'm asking and maybe pushing a little bit is this is in close proximity to the bike path.
Right.
There is a massive bike path extension project going
Right.
on.
Right.
And certainly one of the things that the city has tried to encourage is bicycle traffic and
Right.
access. And so I'm satisfied that what your representation is, people have used bikes, there's places for people to park bikes, there's no formal bike rack, but there also hasn't been a lot of bike traffic either.
That's right.
So the next issue is planting, and this is a particular question. Could you give a description of what your site looks like? Particularly, my impression driving by is that there's a great deal of paved area, and there's not a lot of green or brown space.
there's a few weeds that have sprung up between the paved space and the building. I don't know, if we're gonna be counting those, but Meredith noticed the other day, I think he talked about our one-story office building. That's adjacent to the river. There's a lawn out there. I mean, we've been mowing that lawn for 40 years. It could be 400 or 500 square feet. It's like 10 by 60 or so. It's just there. Now, I don't know if that counts as green space. And there's vegetation on the bank down to the river. There's probably 1,000 feet down there. There's all kinds of trees, lilac bushes growing there. I know they're on the end of the building, and it's not like having shrubs all the way around your building, but it's on the property.
But at least, if we look at your property from, and you're referring, when you say this green area, you're referring to this area between the office building and really the Winooski River.
No,
Or is there?
there's about 10 feet toward the river before you start going down the bank. I didn't draw this picture here. I think I got this from the city. So they're kind of showing the river closer, where in fact there's like a sandbar down on the river now, so we've gained another 25 feet out into the river. But actually mowed space right there, there's 500 or 600 feet that we mow that's flat before the riverbank starts to go over the river.
Sure, but
There's a picture of it here?
Yeah, so, Peter,
And there does appear to be trees in front of the property between the building and the Winooski River. You do have trees there?
There's lilac bushes right on the edge where it starts heading down, which is a riverbank.
Yep.
But, there's an average of probably 8 feet from the building before the river bank starts. Flat area. And it's like 70 feet long.
So the picture
That's the
that,
space right here. These are
Yeah.
lilac bushes right here that
Okay.
are probably kind of overgrown into
Those
that
are-
lawn a little bit.
yeah, those are massive, those are massive lilacs. My goodness.
But this green area here, is that the only green area on your property, or are there other, apart from the weeds that are coming up between the... In part, we're, just to give you a sense about where I'm coming from, so you can understand, I think, and direct your answer is, under the new zoning bylaws, we're required to look at the landscaping, and there are certain goals that are articulated in the zoning bylaws to effectuate the landscaping plans for all properties. And in part, that deals with the planting, but I think if we make findings on this, it requires us to have an understanding about what we're screening, or what we're seeking to screen or not screen, or incapable of screening. And so it's really important to understand, what does the property look like? And so we have a good sense that between the Winooski River and your buildings, there's this line of sort of, call them volunteers, wild growth trees. They haven't been planted or necessarily maintained. And then you have a strip of lawn.
Right.
Are there other green spaces?
Between, I don't think it shows you, but Allen Lumber Company and I just kind of share a space between Allen Lumber Company's building and the end of our office. We have our office right by the bridge, and it extends down to a garage on the other end. This is like 70 feet long. There's a space that's probably 4 foot wide by the width of the building, which is 25 feet. The water falls off Allen Lumber Company's roof into that area, and there used to be poison ivy in there, but we got rid of that. But it would grow in there, in that space, whatever you put in there.
It would have to be water tolerant.
Huh?
It'd have to be water tolerant if their runoff comes off of there, I presume.
Right, whatever's in there is water tolerant, right?
So that's that space here between the office building and Allen Lumber. If if Granite Street's here,
Right.
you get the space, and then, but I just want to make sure that I have the right understanding, which is that for the rest of the property, around the factory
Right.
building, in front of the office, between Allen Lumber and the parking area, and in front of the building itself on either street, we're really talking about pavement.
Pavement, right.
And that's long-standing pavement. That's not something you just freshly created.
Right.
Okay. So, I think that's helpful. And is it, what kind of landscaping are you proposing with this? Not any.
I mean, Meredith put it pretty bluntly, you know, are we gonna have to remove pavement? I mean, we're pretty much parked up against the building all the way around. I don't foresee an easy solution to that. You know, you've got a third of an acre of land there, and a lot of it's building and parking, and, you know, there's really no wiggle room.
Any other questions? All right. So then, I think it makes sense at this point, unless, to go through some of the conditional use criteria and standards. In particular,
Starts at the top of 14.
yeah, let's talk about the capacity of the community facilities and utilities. This section requires us to make findings that the applicant shall demonstrate that the proposed development shall not cause a disproportionate or unreasonable burden on the city's ability to provide community facilities and utilities, including 1, local schools, 2, police, fire protection, ambulance service, 3, street infrastructure and maintenance, 4, park and recreation facilities, 5, water supply, sewage, disposal and stormwater systems and infrastructure. And I think unless the board feels strongly that the local schools, the police, fire protection, ambulance service, the street infrastructure and maintenance, and the park and recreation facility are really not affected by this application. I did want to confirm the water supply for this space. Is that city water and sewer?
City water and sewer.
Okay, and are you adding any capacity through this change of use?
Maybe 1 sink, a cleanup sink.
Okay. Into the existing infrastructure of the building?
Right.
So I'm not seeing any other impacts unless anybody wants to explore that. Moving then on, the next issue that we have is traffic. The applicant has to demonstrate that the proposed development will not have an undue adverse impact or effect on traffic in the area, including the volume, type, and timing of traffic generated, that the traffic generated by the proposed development shall not unreasonably and disproportionately contribute to a reduced level of service to affected streets, and that reasonable measures have been taken to minimize and mitigate the amount of vehicular traffic generated by proposed development. I think the evidence here shows it's a fairly de minimis, if not a precisely de minimis impact on this. What is the space being used for currently? Are we talking about one use for another, or is this empty space?
No, this was formerly our clothespin assembly area and the packaging of clothespins and the assembling of clothespins. The last 10 or 12 years, we've been making, we got into injection molding about 15 years ago because we had to have plastic clothespins, but more recently, we've been making medical parts for diagnostic equipment. So that's injection molding. We had 3 machines in there now. There's only 1, and that one's going out of that space. So kind of winding down our injection molding operation.
So how many people are we talking about that would run these machines or working in this space that you're now shifting to a different?
Probably 1 full-time employee.
Okay. So really, when we talk about this, and I think it's important to understand that when we're talking about the impact of traffic, not only is it de minimis, but really it's not 2 people, it's 1 person, because you're replacing, you already have 1 person coming, and this person's going to essentially fill their space.
Right.
Okay. Unless there's any questions on traffic, I'll move on to 3303. That's the character of the neighborhood standards, and that requires the applicant shall demonstrate that the proposed development shall not have an undue adverse effect upon the character of the neighborhood. So this is the industrial section of that riverfront.
Right.
The granite, you're right next to the granite sheds and right next to Allen Lumber. And nothing about this, in fact, I understand that we're classifying this as light manufacturing, but this in effect is probably going to be more closer to like an office type use, because your
Right.
testimony is that you have an artist coming in.
I
who's
explained this to
making-
the artists about how they're being put in this box that says light manufacturing. They didn't care what you called it.
Oh, I would think they'd be pleased about that, So the second criteria is architectural compatibility. New development shall be architecturally compatible with the neighborhood. This is not applicable because you're not talking about changing any of the exterior features. This is just different people in the same space. You might do, I think your testimony was there were some interior changes?
But, yeah,
Possible.
It's going to be new wiring, and the two walls of this space were insulated with what they used to call a beaver board. It was just a couple of spaces, a couple of very thin layers of almost like cardboard to create two air spaces in the wall. We've taken all of that out, and we're gonna insulate it.
The next criteria is yards, lot coverage, and landscaping. This says that new development shall maintain a sense of open space that's appropriate to the neighborhood by balancing size and building's footprint with the mass and of the structure and size of the lot. Again, this is not applicable because you're not changing anything about the building. This is just a switch in the internal use. The final one is performance standards, and this allows the board to impose conditions deemed necessary to further the purpose of Chapter 330, including performance standards about noise, glare, odors, vibration, electrical or radio interference, waste storage needs, particulate matter, or airborne solids or flammable, toxic, or hazardous substances or waste. And I think,
Those.
so I read in your application, but I just want to make sure we're clear for the record, these artists use largely non-toxic materials.
Right.
And how will waste be disposed of?
I think most everything is water-based.
But I mean, if trash and such, do you have dumpsters on site?
We do.
Okay, so this would just go into the normal trash that's existing
Right,
for the...
right.
And then, I mean, there's nothing inherent as far as the creation of art that would necessarily trigger a noise or glare, odor, vibration, electrical or radio interference.
No.
They're not a particular type of artist that uses some large electronic device or HVAC system inside.
No, they've been asked already, and
Okay. All right. Is there anything else anybody wishes to ask?
So I just want to clarify, so they're essentially painters, is that what you're saying?
yes,
Like painting on canvas, that's what they're
yes,
doing?
large canvas.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions? If not, I'll entertain either a motion or discussion. I think we have to make a discussion before a motion about the landscaping issue. What's the pleasure of the board? Let me just suggest that I think this is a similar type of situation to the 27 School Street, which is that we've received testimony that any requirement that was based strictly on the perimeter of the building would be inconsistent with the lot and certainly the current conditions. I'm just one board member, and I'm just going to, I'll let anyone else express, but it doesn't seem like this use triggers the need for any type of landscaping change, nor does there seem to be a need for that type of shift in landscaping, given that it's an industrial site and has limited capacity on its best day.
And I would agree with that, Mr. Chair. And I mean, we have to keep in mind that this is in effect a reduction in the intensity of use. And we want to, I don't think, unduly burden the applicant with improvements that would way outstrip the scale of the project we're proposing. So I would be willing to look favorably down the line of conditions to this application.
Mr. Chair, with a net increase of one occupant. I don't necessarily agree that it is a de-intensification of the use, though I agree that it's, as far as traffic and things like that, though it's painters instead of machines.
From what is allowed. I mean, clearly, it was used as a.
From what is allowed, right. I thought you meant from what is currently taking place there, which is also allowed. I would, given the need to balance the reasonableness of landscaping requests with the clear purpose of the landscaping and screening provision, I would value and appreciate discussing this in deliberative session as we did with the previous example last week. I am also just one board member, but that would be helpful to me.
And I guess I would agree on thinking about deliberative session for this, in part because these new landscaping provisions are tricky as they apply to these pre-existing uses. And I agree with your statement that we need to be reasonable and take into account the particular lot. But as a board, we're also creating precedent. So I think it makes sense for us to talk about how we want to talk about this, because other applicants will come forward, and we want to make sure that we're consistent.
Is that a consensus of the board? So well, let me ask, is there any more information that we require from the applicant at this time? Or do we feel comfortable, does each board member feel comfortable voting on both the minor site plan and conditional use review?
Yes.
Okay, so what I would accept is a motion to close the evidence and move into a deliberative session.
So moved.
And the actual reason why we're moving into deliberative session is?
To discuss, I think, the landscaping requirements and ultimately the approval of the application, because I don't think we can make a motion to approve the application until we've resolved that landscaping issue. So we would close the record, move into deliberative session, presumably discuss the landscaping, and out of that then approve or disapprove the minor site plan and conditional use review. Is that consistent with everyone's?
Just for the record, I will vote to go into deliberative session, but as one board member, I don't see the need to do so.
Okay. Duly noted. So there's a motion to go into deliberative session and close the evidence by Deb. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Rob. All those any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of going into deliberative session and closing the record, please raise your right hand. Thank you very much, Peter. We should issue a decision shortly. We're just going to discuss this, and Meredith will be in touch.
Want me to leave? Or?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Matter of procedure, we typically do deliberative session at the very end for any and all. Or do we do it in the middle?
We can do it in the middle. We have
Necessary to, though, is it?
no. We can take it up at the end if we wish
Okay.
to. Certainly, given the scope of the next project, it would make sense to keep that moving forward if the next project is here. Yeah, that's the theme of the evening. I guess with the school, I was expecting a large crowd of children to.
I've got two over here. Or maybe one that works.
Yeah. I don't think so. I mean, I think if we get into that much detail, we got bigger problems.
Okay.
Putting us, we're not gonna solve it by
Okay, no, I
another
just do have the other
post-it
ones
notes.
downstairs.
Class schedule is semester. She's on early.
Nice.
So.
that. That's the only one, sometimes I don't think with them. But yes, I think they gave us enough.
They did good.
No, we made sure Andrew gave us everything.
All right.
So if you'll state your names for the record, and then I'll swear you in before you give testimony.
Paul Bover, Engineering Ventures.
Andrew LaRosa, Director of Facilities for the Montpelier Roxbury School District.
Great. If you raise your right hand, you solemnly swear or affirm that the evidence and testimony you're about to give for the matter under consideration shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, under the pains and penalties of perjury. Great. Why don't we have, Meredith, why don't you give a just overview and focus us on what we're doing, because this is a minor, notwithstanding the very voluminous application materials, this is a minor site plan review. And our scope is somewhat limited.
So it's a minor site plan review and request for a waiver of the footprint maximum. It's extensive revisions to the Union Elementary School playground, including some renovations to the entrance on the playground side for ADA accessibility, and that's where the footprint waiver comes in. The major issues, you've got the footprint waiver, and then the other really big one is the development on steep slopes. So other than the footprint waiver, the only reason this is coming to DRB is because of the steep slopes, because we can't, town planning, approve that. So those are your two big issues. There's also some minor things noted in the staff report in red about height of some of the accessory structures that we didn't have confirmation of, some issues with dumpster location, bicycle storage, landscaping maintenance, and an issue with the sign wall. But really the big issues are steep slopes and footprint waiver.
So, Paul or Andrew, I don't know which one of you want to take the lead on giving us a presentation.
Sure. Want me to talk about what we're doing, or you want to talk about the intent?
Well, why don't I talk you through the overall project,
Okay.
and I'll highlight the issues as we run across them, and then we can circle back to the more specific. So the Union Elementary School project, which has been in the works for some years, consists, I would say first and foremost, a lot of it is to do with stormwater and stormwater control, which Paul will address later. Basically, we're rehabilitating the upper playground, what we refer to as the upper playground, providing handicap accessibility up to that playground and the play structures. And then in the lower courtyard, the inner, we refer to it as the lower or inner courtyard, dealing with some stormwater issues, as well as getting appropriate play equipment for that age group. That's pre-K and first that we'll be using that area primarily. So we're getting appropriately sized play equipment there. We're also doing bank stabilization along the back retaining wall, and again, stormwater treatment areas. The vestibule will be about 500-600 square foot handicap accessible vestibule, which will be on the northeast corner at one of the existing entrances to the building. With regards to the slope issues, questions, we have the existing slope in this area, which is below the 30 degree, that we're basically just sliding this direction. It's the same slope that's already there, but we're widening it. Currently, the fire lane runs here. We're now bringing the fire lane closer to the building, so we have to shift that bank over there. We're reducing slope over in this area. One of the areas of concern was over here, where we're actually adjusting the slope. If anyone knows Union, it's a pretty steep bank over there. Near this area where it is becoming, I'll let Paul speak to the severity of the slope change. There's actually stormwater treatment that is actually taking place in that area. The other question was footprint, some of the slope, concerns with slope. We also, I think in the packet, we had a diagram that had all these different areas of concern. You know, this area where we are affecting the slope, it is for maintenance and improvement of the retaining wall. So it's this primarily this area and then this change here.
Okay,
So, we'll talk.
go ahead.
No, it's just, I think one thing I would point out is, we look at the slopes and you look at this area right here, which looks like we're making it quite a bit steeper. Really, these are 1-foot contours, just space within an existing 2-footers. So really, spacing here and the slope is essentially the same in this area. So that might be a little misleading when you look at that. Yeah, I think, as Andrew said, I think one of the primary reasons that this project came about is because honestly, there's some serious drainage issues, and it's just too much of a mess for the kids to use in the spring. Now that this is like a 2016 project in our office, so I've had a chance to see it for a while, and you can see why in the spring. That it's really needs some help. So what we've got going on, other than the things Andrew mentioned, and it's correct that in order to accommodate the vestibule, we push this bank back a little bit. We're pretty similar here. And we do want to improve the field, which is it's really kind of a dust bowl or mud, one or the other, depending on the season. So with this, we have stormwater treatment here, which is a gravel wetland treatment system intended to basically treats a good portion of the fire lane and some of the walkways areas here. We have a bioretention area for a rain garden is there currently. Talked about. This actually is pretty small and it's modest. It treats some of the sidewalks right around that area. And then we have another rain garden, another gravel wetland in this area. I don't know if you're familiar with the gravel wetlands. It's kind of a horizontal filter is the way I think about it. So it's a high-performing treatment system. It doesn't have doesn't require a lot of elevation difference, which is makes it kind of a go-to. Like a UNH data gives it a really high performance. On phosphorus sediment. So for this scenario, we're really limited on elevation at these points, at discharge points. It's a good option for us.
So how does that work with the horizontal? Does the water flow through it on sort of a continuing on the slope, or? So
come into the top of the system, and then it goes through perforated risers. So it goes through a perforated riser into the gravel media, which is open gravel media, and it flows horizontally through that. And then it gets picked up at the other end by a perforated pipe and then discharges. So we have the opportunity to kind of control the rate, and then because it's a long flow path and it's a long slow flow path, you get a lot of settling of particles and some adhesion to the media. So it's a good management practice, especially for sites like this that have some constraints.
And where does it discharge into? Does it discharge into a stormwater drain, or?
Yeah, we're going back. And basically, the whole site right now just discharges to the street drainage system. A couple points here, and we're still having that. We're just doing with more control and treatment ahead of that. In general, the drainage on the site is pretty similar, except for the fact that we're introducing treatment and we're also stabilizing some of these areas. Andrew mentioned the retaining wall work. There's a concrete crib, it's an interesting style. It's like Lincoln logs, but it's concrete. That's our geotechnical engineer said it was stable, so we're trying to reuse that. We can't break the school budget any more than we have, but it is stable, so we're just going to clean that up on the sides. We're adding a bit of gabion wall. This is I think less than 4 feet. Gabion is wire baskets filled with stones. This end, some gabion, and then in the dumpster area, trash area, we're bringing in sheet pile wall. So this we have a grade differential, like 7.2 is the highest in the corner, 7.2 feet. We're moving into that bank a little bit, so we were either going to temporarily sheet pile it and then put some other retaining wall system in, or do permanent sheet pile. So we're doing permanent sheet pile here, given the use and the location.
What is a sheet pile?
Steel sheet pile. So it's steel sheets. They're kind of W-shaped, corrugated. It's kind of like the inside of a cardboard box, that kind of shape in there. But they lock together and they drive them down. In this case, the sheet piles rely on the buried portion to restrain the earth above it, as opposed to like the gabions are just by weight. The weight of it holds it back.
Is that sheet pile what you see at construction sites when they're digging down but then they're often removed after they can.
Right, in that case. Yeah, so often we do that. In this case, we wouldn't necessarily prefer to use that throughout the site for the aesthetics, but it seal and be in the trash area, which is kind of a good use, and it saves us digging more into the soil. Soils are expensive to get rid of in an urban site, and so really less disturbance and less work on that is better.
A clarification point on the gravel wetland. Does
Yeah.
that sit on the surface, or is it a structure that is beneath the
Yes.
ground?
Right. So there's a depression, so that'll hold some of the.
It's probably in here somewhere. Forgive me if I
Sheet
couldn't quite
C3
identify it.
sheet 3.1.
So there is a depression that holds the water until it filters through, and then there's layering. So there's a top is a growth media, so it's a planting media, which is kind of really ends up being kind of a sandy topsoil mix. You know, we're aiming for kind of a low phosphorus mix, but something that will still grow plants. And then there's a choke course, which is a layer of stone that's fine enough to kind of keep those materials separate, keep it out of the lower material. And then beneath that is the gravel. It's like an open graded gravel.
That makes sense. I was
Yeah.
picturing gravel rectangles around elementary school students and just how
Oh.
irresistible that
Yeah.
would be.
Right. Well, that's one of the reasons that we went with. Another reason we went with a gravel wetland is
That satisfies
Yeah.
my concern.
it's standing water. We don't really want standing water in this kind
Right.
of location, so it would be very temporary if it comes in.
It was a social more than an engineering question, so thank you.
If you go to LA 301, there's more of a appealing image of what it's going to be versus an engineering. No offense.
I could be offended by that. Nobody wants to look at the engineering plans.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
It's the image with the parsley on it.
Pretty one? Got it. Okay, great, thank you.
So just to go back to, I know slope stability was a big question here, but really, I think the areas we're working on, with the exception possibly of the above this wall, which has some instability already, everything else is that we're trying to rectify some current instability. There's a spot in the bank here where there's a little bit of slope washout. I think that's because there's water moving underneath the existing material, so we have under drain system going around here to kind of collect that subsurface.
Yeah, there's photos in the
Right.
packet in between.
You're talking about
Yep.
Okay.
that existing B that looks like a washout behind a basketball hoop.
Right.
Is that's what you're
Yeah,
talking
so
about?
that's an interesting one, because there was a slope repair done a while back, and it's a layer, so it's a more porous material on top of the tight soils underneath. And I was really puzzling on that one until I got out there when it was wet, and I think the water's going through the top, running along the bottom on that top material, and it's washing out the sand from underneath, and then the grass is falling in. So the intent is we have to pick that water up with the under drain, and then kind of stabilize that area.
Great.
Meredith, I do have some information from the landscape architect reflecting answers to a couple of your questions.
We can, I think.
All right, I think it may make sense to go, let's start with what I think, and I'll be happy, or not so happy to be corrected, but I think the easier one, which is the expansion of the building footprint and the footprint waiver. The current building footprint, I think the applicant has indicated something like 31,000 square feet. And it's well in excess of the 3,000 square foot maximum in this district. So we're already above. And you're seeking to increase by 439 feet, square feet roughly. So about 1.4% of the total building envelope you're adding. So my understanding of the zoning bylaws, as the staff has helped out, is that there's no limit in the waiver that the board may grant for building footprints, but we do have to follow the process. So the question is, the board must make findings that the waiver, if authorized, shall not alter the essential character of the neighborhood or district in which the property is located, substantially or permanently impair the lawful use or development of adjacent property, reduce access to renewable energy resources, or be detrimental to the public welfare, and the proposed land development is beneficial or necessary for continued reasonable use of property. So what I'd like to take testimony on is, the purpose of this vestibule extension that's being built.
Currently, the only handicap accessible entrance to the building is down, excuse
Want
me,
me to drive while you?
is down here. And currently, the elevator is over here. Next summer, hopefully in the spring, we're actually going to be installing a new elevator here. So the idea is that we provide handicap accessibility right off the sidewalk as quickly as possible without tearing up the historic front of the building, and getting it right to where the handicap accessible elevator would be.
Okay, and that's really the entire purpose of vestibule, is for ADA accessibility?
Yeah, pretty much. There's some thought that it'll be used, as foul weather enclosure before people, but fundamentally, no, it's handicap accessibility.
I was going to say, if it's a foul weather site, it doesn't seem all that large.
That's why I say I don't think it's going to be used as one all that much. Maybe the after-school program or something of that nature. But most of the kids are picked up out on Loomis Street anyway, so.
And is this being, I mean, obviously, I can see why the school might be interested in making the site more friendly for ADA, for people with disabilities. But is this being driven by any type of federal or state mandate?
I don't believe anyone has told us we had to do it. I think it was being good citizens.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But I have not heard that we've been cited or forced to do it. No, it was part of the overall just making the building more accessible.
Modernizing the building.
Modernizing and making it more accessible.
And the reason to put I mean, the current handicap accessible entrance that's at the back.
Yeah.
Will that change? Will that still be handicap accessible?
It will, yeah.
Okay. But this is just something that's going to be that much closer to the elevator?
Yep.
And currently, if somebody accesses that existing handicap entrance, even if the elevator was relocated, if I'm remembering correctly about Union Elementary on the first floor, they still have to go up a ramp, down a hallway.
And the spirit of ADA, and I'll leave it at that, is you would be telling a student, you have to go back by the entrance that everybody else is using to go use the other entrance.
Okay. And that, because where the vestibule is going is one of the main entrances into the building?
Yeah, and especially at recess
And with the vestibule, will other students, it won't be simply for disabled students, it would be for all students?
Correct. Most of the students, unless they're down here at lunch, which a lot of them are let out from lunch to go to recess, or go to recess into lunch. Everybody else will head out the straightest beeline they can to the playground, which is this door.
So they'll largely use that entrance and exit as they did
Absolutely.
before?
Absolutely.
And will there be any limitation as a result of this additional vestibule, as far as anything that's being done now that won't be able to be done because of this addition?
No.
Are you losing, I know that there's a storage barn currently where
No, that's been moved to Union. We're actually, as part of the vestibule project, there is a small little storage area, moved to Main Street Middle School.
Okay.
Permitted and everything. There is going to be a small outdoor storage area that a snow blower can be stored in, kind of thing, but not, it's a relatively small room.
And that's what was stored in that barn before, was a snowblower?
Yeah, that and probably some toys, and it's been cleaned out for a little while.
Anybody have any other questions about the vestibule? Okay, great. Why don't we move on, and we'll come back to whether we need to grant the grant of the waiver of the footprint maximum. So, there's a couple of just sort of into the weed points. On your diagram, C 3.0. Which details the sheet pile wall. What kind of height are we talking about? And first of all, maybe let's just orient everyone. where this, where the sheet pile wall is going? Is that's what we were talking about before over by dumpsters, right?
That's right here.
Okay.
It's right in this area.
And how high of a wall are we talking about?
Highest is 7.2 feet, slightly less over here. So it drops off. It is hard to read in the small prints, but on the plan, it calls out the top and bottom of the wall. So if you were looking at approval, it's no, not that it's easy to find.
Sorry.
But it is like it's there as a basis if you want to have it as part of the approval.
So it's 7 feet tall at its
Yeah.
maximum?
Yeah.
And is that a uniform height throughout the wall, or does it?
It's essentially 7 feet across the backside, and then I think it tapers down to where I can't read it on this. Can I? I can't read it. It tapers down on the side.
So, the next issue is the swing set
Yes.
climbing net structures.
Yep.
How big are these?
Yeah, and I can give this to Meredith when we're done here, but, so I got this from the landscape architect. The Explorer Dome Climber is 13'4", the swings are 8'4", and the nest, which is this structure in the back on the slope here, is 11'4" from the deck elevation and 17'1" from the lowest elevation, so that's from the lowest grade adjacent to the top of the roof.
And so the demolition, and I've seen that there's a lot of demolition that's occurred already. But let's just be exact as to what has or is being demolished on this site before construction commences on the new structures. So,
All the current play equipment has been removed,
Okay.
other than a few miscellaneous log kind of ground things. But all the existing swing sets, jungle gyms, parallel bars, whatever you'd call them, have all been removed. The city has taken them. I believe they're being stored up at Hubbard for now for reuse in the coming years.
okay. And that includes both the kindergarten, first grade playground in the back, as well as the sort of upper grade playground off of Hubbard Street. But no part of the actual building itself is being demolished. And as you said, the storage barn has been moved as well.
Yep.
And that's not returning?
No.
So let's talk about the steep slopes. And if I understand correctly, and I'm just going to restate this to make sure that I'm understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, along the back of the building,
This area?
right there, yes, are you changing any grading of the steep slopes, or just simply stabilizing?
No, this is just a kind of a surface repair of the retaining wall. So the way the wall is set up, it relies on geotextile, it's going to hold some stone back. Basically, we're putting that back together. The wall is basically staying back as it is, or maybe being restacked a little bit, but grades are the same behind here. Same thing here. We're just replacing the section that's really deteriorated on this end with the gabion, which is the stone-filled baskets. So that's not changing either. On this side, really the only spot where we're really making great differences, slightly in here, but really primarily at that sheet pile wall where we're pulling back to create some space for the trash area, kind of free up the fire lane.
And that change in the steep slope is strictly to enlarge the fire lane, is that
Just
Well,
wall
there's-
stabilization.
just wall stabilization?
Yeah.
Okay. And then the other areas around on the, I always call it the upper playground.
Around here?
Well, either of those, so where are we changing the steep slopes?
The slope here is just getting pushed back. That's really not a critical slope. In here, we're generally doing small fill, but it's essentially the same a little bit of reworking. I think it's right in this area. It's very small. Here again, we're pretty close to matching grades here, or extending fill out. But again, it's more of a stabilization process, and including these seat walls. That's all part of kind of a way of stabilizing this and stepping things along.
So you're terracing some of that steep slope for
bit
those, so you're moving the amphitheater up there, right?
The amphitheater is basically, the function is out here. No, the intent is not to make anything steeper, but it really is kind of we're hitting areas or working on areas that are already a little bit are muddy and surface unstable. And this area is being reworked a little bit. These are essentially the same slopes, and this is not the steepest part. It is pretty steep, but it's not the steepest. And again, it looks steeper because we've got 1 foot contour shown next to twos, so it looks like there's more going on than there is there.
Okay. And about how much of square foot of land are we talking about with disturbing the steep slopes?
Do you still have that diagram?
Yeah, this sheet.
Yeah,
I think I remember the
It's
numbers.
it's not completely clear in here on how much of it is 30% or greater, which is the really big issue.
That would be
So this is the plus this and this, you know, I mean, technically, some of the walls technically are
Exactly.
30% or greater.
Exactly.
This is that big area.
Yeah, that's primarily,
So this,
this is actually getting a reduction.
right, but what is the grade or slope there right now?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
You know what I mean?
Okay.
Because
Yeah.
it's disturbance of the slopes under the regs. It
Doesn't
doesn't
say
matter
one
what-
way or the
Yeah,
other.
it
Yeah.
doesn't matter what you do with it. You're doing something with it.
Right. So I would suggest that's probably close to the 30%. And
Yeah, it's
Parts of it.
I mean, that bank is pretty steep and
close to that. I don't have a number.
You have a
And we're
big
on-
version of the C.
Sorry, we're looking at
C0.
C.0? Okay.
Do you have a big version of this?
I don't have it.
And when we're talking about the part that is likely 30 degrees, or 30% rather, we're looking at this part with
Nope.
number 481.
no, it's
No,
the,
that area is actually slightly flatter.
Oh, this is marked, plus or
Yeah.
minus 29%.
Yeah. So, I mean, technically, the way the regs are written, even the retaining walls, because technically they are greater than 30%, there's no exemption in the regs for man-made retaining walls, which is something that's getting fixed.
So slope
But-
includes human-made structures and naturally occurring
Yeah,
slopes
the
of land.
human-made structures to hold back the
No?
bank, when you're taking those down and then putting up new ones, technically that still falls within you're not supposed to do it, which is one of the things we're working to.
and reducing slope doesn't, same thing with
You're-
reduction of slope?
Yeah, you're quote-unquote disturbing them.
Right.
So it's not very practical the way it's written right now.
You never can see all those things until you start using them. So,
Yep, and some of us weren't here when the regs were being drafted.
So, this is a lot of site work and sounds like it will lead to some long-term safety improvements as well as erosion and stormwater and all of that and some fun things to play on. When a big project like this is undertaken, what are the monitoring processes after completion to make sure that it takes and settles in and does everything that it's supposed to do? There are a lot going on in this area. I'm curious to know how that is
yeah,
monitored over time.
there are requirements for the, and again, this is, I'm used to the hard surfaces, I mean, will be the hard surfaces, but you're thinking primarily, I think, about the landscape elements and how the grass grows in, how, there is a requirement in the plans that landscape contractor is responsible for a 90-day maintenance following instructions. Plants have a 1-year replacement warranty. That came from the landscape architect.
That's less what I'm asking about than the ongoing stability of
Yeah.
the structures once the slope is modified. I mean, the plantings are, I know, can be part of that, but making sure that the walls are sturdy and remain sturdy. I'm just very curious, as a resident and a parent, how you keep an eye on that, maybe.
Well, I'm going to jump in and say the walls are going to be secure because they were designed by an engineer.
Oh, good.
With regards to the ongoing maintenance, I think that the district and the community has seen what happens when you let a property go into disrepair. And it wasn't all that long ago that there was under draining put under the playground, and
sort of got forgotten about. So I think that after the community makes this kind of investment in this playground, that the community will not be shy about letting us know when they see something that doesn't look right, and we're not going to be shy about maintaining it and correcting it, whether it's grass that's getting beat up from too many little kids' footprints, we'll change a pattern, or whether it's a piece of soil that's sloughing because of some sort of underpinning that wasn't correctly.
Good. So as far as staying up, designed by an engineer is important, and I agree that physics is to be trusted when done correctly. But I guess my real question is there a stress test? Is there a way to make sure that the walls were indeed not only designed correctly, but built correctly? I'm amazed that in Montpelier we've got so many steep slopes and houses doing what they're doing. They've done it for 100 years. That's great. I'm still curious to know just how you ensure that it is sturdy over time. Is there an annual inspection? After you've built a major wall like this, what do you do?
I'm assuming, go ahead.
Well, yeah, I mean, the wall we build is again, yeah, designed by engineers, and there'll be geotechnical engineers designing that wall. Will be some oversight during construction, periodic oversight, so it will get built per plan, and then I think the ongoing maintenance is really going to fall on the school department.
There'll be a 1-year inspection before the warranty period, for lack of a better term, is we will all get together, the engineers and the contractor, and we'll take another walk around. Like I say, before that 1 year is up, to say, okay, is everything functioning the way it's supposed to?
I presume that this functions the same way that an engineer works, say, like with a building, when you remove a retaining wall and put in like an I-beam or something, that there's calculations behind it, studies of the soil. And so, there's some thought, and of course you're a professional licensed engineer.
I understand that it's designed with consideration for those things,
No,
but I think you get the
it's a good
gist
point.
of my question, that there's the 1-year inspection, is there the 5-year inspection, the 10-year inspection, in addition to the maintenance, which we know will be important.
Yeah.
And it sounds like maybe that's not a matter of practice in the way that I'm thinking of it right now.
It's good practice, and absolutely, as the facilities director for the school district, something that we probably should get written down and make it part of our yearly routine with all our projects, all buildings.
Thanks for mentioning that. It's not within our jurisdiction to say and check it every 5 years, but I express it as a community member looking at the whole of the project.
So how much of this, and I'm looking at C.0, is driven by erosion control concerns?
I would say, probably most of it. And of course, I didn't bring that sheet with me.
Which one are you looking at?
Well, I'm looking at C.0, which has the
that was
color.
it, yeah, which I should have grabbed.
Which you're welcome to take mine if that will help.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the way the sheet is laid out, that the cross-hatching is going to represent the repair stabilization. I think is that across here. The amphitheater area, which again needs some work. Great, pulled out, but this would be also fall into that category, because this is an area where there's some failure there. That's all that here, so it's almost the whole site, except for this area.
So really, it's only the area close to a fire lane that you're pulling back to expand the fire lane for public safety purposes that is not dealing with erosion control and stabilization.
And those are, in that flat area, where there's actually some good sun, there's some grass on there.
Okay.
Thanks.
And Meredith, DPW's reviewed the proposed changes and grades and project. Did they have any further comments than what your packet indicated that they seem to approve?
No. This was, when it comes to the slopes, they were in approval of all the work. I know that for, erosion, stormwater issues, which are all part of this package, there's going to be some continuing discussion about the kickball field, which is the square to the northeast, about how to deal with that drainage area. But other than that, they were good with everything else that's being proposed.
Yeah, the comments from DPW were that there is an existing drainage system. I just found one other piece of that just before this meeting. So it's there, it's just been buried all this time. The debate is whether we reuse it or not. And I think one of the considerations is having metal drainage grates in the play area, which is kind of a knee buster. I think, we had planned on kind of putting a kind of more of a subsurface system in, and I think we're going to stick with that. But
Yeah, I think so. Tom liked the new design of bringing it across over the top and dropping it down into those drains. And so.
Awesome.
And just so I understand, I'm going through some of the staff comments. Sheet C.2.0, C2.0 is your erosion control plan?
Yeah, that is. And we do have approval from the state for that under construction general permit. And for that matter, on Meredith, I don't think you had them. We have 2 operational stormwater permits for the site, both issued and current. I can give you copies, or you probably want PDFs.
Whichever. You
Okay.
can give me copies tonight, or you can send me the PDFs for us to throw in. Either one is fine.
I have them with me.
Right. Then there was a picture, and I'm moving forward unless anybody had any further questions about erosion or the steep slopes. The sign wall that you're planning on installing, where is that, or the wall with, I think, some carvings on it?
That has been removed from the project. If it's going to be, as you probably know, there's been a lot of cross savings that's gone into this plan, but it would be on this wall, correct? That's where.
I think that's the section. Yep.
If there's a donor or a volunteer that wants to put on it, would be in this area.
I would just caution, the city learned that the hard way, that who you put as a donor may not resonate well with the community.
I think we learned that, yeah.
With the granite park that was put out front, and a number of different businesses donated money for it, put their name on it. There was a public uproar, and they had to build granite facing to cover those names out there.
I don't think, I think, like I say, I think we learned that one, and I think there's a thorough quote, or I don't recall who it was, but we absolutely would.
I don't think the version I had donors on it.
Yeah, no, we didn't have.
It was just inspirational messages, but,
But so is the wall still being built and there's just nothing on it?
Correct.
Okay.
And that may be a later project at a later time. And
Absolutely.
Okay, so it's nothing that we have to review at this time or consider. All right, I'm going to move into the site plan standards, and the first issue that's come up is the question of bike access. I know there were existing bike racks. Will there be bike racks incorporated?
Currently, this is not the best plan for it, but this area here is going to be paved, and we're going to have bike racks there. Whether we bring back, currently we have, I believe there's 3 of them. Again, that was a cost savings. We had very nice sculptural ones that were set into the concrete. For right now, we're going to keep this area paved and and I believe that there's a group that's applying for a grant from the state for bike racks.
So the
But
plan.
we will have bike racks.
Okay. And is it going to be just in that one location?
As it stands now, yeah, because the rest of it is grass and hilly, so that's kind of the spot that kids can ride right up to. And
Okay. Let's talk about the landscaping, and what are the plans for plantings?
not as extensive as they were 4 months ago, but still quite extensive. I would say that
do you have my set?
the LA
201.
That's the material.
Oh,
You wanna
that's
go past
materials.
that, so.
That's materials. 201 is the materials, the hardscape.
300?
And
I thought it was,
That's details.
I thought there was a plan.
Oh, here we go.
There we go, yeah.
the 400s, the LA 400s. Key itself, the planting key is on 402.
Sure. Mine are folded.
Yeah. Okay. So, what are we talking about for sort of a oh, here we go, with the tree planting key on 402.
So it's 402,
Well, yeah, we
here's
have-
the key, right?
Yeah,
So-
and there's quantities on the
Right.
key.
Okay. So it looks like,
Yeah, it's a series of shade trees on the bank and then interspaced within the upper playground area. Some perennial plantings along the edges. Again, I'm not a tree guy necessarily, so.
We will freely admit that we don't have the one shrub per 5 linear feet for the 1,000 linear feet that we have. But we're hoping that we can count the hillside and its vegetation, and the trees and plants that are up there towards that
Right.
number relative to the function of being a playground.
so, as opposed to a forest where we lose children. So I'm understanding I'm counting 22 new trees, and then it looks as if you're keeping about 12 for a total of 34,
Yep.
and then
And then all the trees on the hillside.
all the trees on the hillside, as well as all the shrubs on the hillside. And then it looks like, I'm just going from the staff report, which I think is culled from your report, that there's 20 existing shrubs, and you plan to plant about 111 additional shrubbery.
You have to go to, yeah, probably in the.
I think
little more over.
that's counting, the grasses and the...
I pulled that, I honestly
Oh,
didn't
no,
go
you know
through and
what?
count everything. I
That
pulled
looks-
that from the application materials.
Team.
I didn't to be honest, I didn't
That's
recount
30,
everything.
32. No, that comes from the shrub key. It looks like there's like 13 Cornus,
Yeah.
Arctic Fire, 22. So a couple of dogwoods, some sweet fern, witch hazel, sumac, elderberry, silky willow. Looks good to me.
I think that grasses could be construed as shrubbery, as far as meeting the purpose of the landscaping to enhance the appearance of the built environment, create shade, no. Provide a landscape buffer, screen land uses. The grasses accomplish all those things.
They do, but there's actually definitions in the regs
Ah.
about there's different categories of shrubs and woody
Forgot
stems.
about the shrub categories.
Yeah.
All right.
Sorry.
All right.
I wish it would make everything so much easier.
I believe we have that discussion during the nymph application. Monty Python joke.
Rob is with you.
Okay, so essentially, we're looking, do we have a total count as to if we were to go with the 5 per linear square feet of the,
Well, like I say, I think I calculated as close to 1,000 linear feet
Yeah.
of building.
Yep, so is required 200 shrubs and 34 trees is what's required under the regulations. What is being proposed right now is 34 trees and 131 shrubs being planted, plus you factor in everything that's already on the hillsides.
hillside.
So, they
Yeah.
haven't gone out and counted every single one. but my estimation is that we're at or near 200, probably more.
And there's a standard condition that we usually put for landscaping, that if a plant dies, that you replace it within a year, a reasonable amount of time. You'd have no problem with that condition. If you plant a new tree,
I would
replant it.
say that would certainly be the intent, but I can't speak for the school district and the taxpayers, but absolutely. I mean, the intent is that we're going to maintain this, and absolutely, we're going to maintain it to the best of our abilities.
If you're going to put that condition, then maybe I'd suggest that you allow them to put a different species in case one doesn't survive for a reason.
I think we give a certain amount of flexibility to the applicant as to the nature of that, but there's a requirement that you maintain the shrub, that, this is particularly important, that, if there's a dead boxwood, it doesn't just sit there as a dead boxwood for year after year.
Yeah, absolutely. For the safety of the children, we're not going to allow trees that are dead to lay there and rot, and we're not going to let things get overgrown. Yeah, absolutely.
Good. Although my son is willing to use a saw.
There's good reasons for that rule.
Okay, so let's move on, unless there's any further questions about landscaping. There is one question about the dumpster location and any fencing that you're proposing or not proposing about the dumpster.
Well, the location is selected and the way it's being installed, it's really hidden on these sides already. So if there was a question of screening, I don't know if what you feel about that. But.
I would rather, well, I'm not sure it's up to me, but the idea is that the dumpsters now that are kind of sitting right out there are now going to be pushed back into the corner. Unless it's a requirement, I'd rather have the custodial staff give them the direction that nothing should be leaning against a dumpster, that a dumpster should be clean, and you should rake it out around it every now and again, and don't turn it into a dumpster, turn it into a blue box that's sitting there and it's clean around it. Barring an actual requirement to put a fence up there or around it, rarely do they may look good the first day, but they're not going to be, as people go in there and smash it against snowbanks trying to get trash out at 2 o'clock in the morning, and things get broken. And
well, it does, 3205D does talk about, does talk about the idea of outdoor storage and the keeping any materials, goods, equipment, unregistered vehicles, or other items not for sale in an unroofed area for more than 24 hours may be allowed as accessory use in accordance with following. And particularly outdoor storage areas shall be fenced in and screened from view from the street and surrounding properties. So that's at least, Meredith, that's what you're suggesting would cover the dumpsters? And
yeah, I mean, it's a, part of it was also not being clear exactly, I know you have the squares here, from owner, however it is. In that spot, can those be seen from the road easily from there? Because I'm not sure exactly what we've got for the hillside there.
Well,
are they effectively already screened?
Well, they're mostly screened. If you drew a line from dumpsters, there's very little of it, a very small area where you can see it from on the road. But it's not to say none, but...
It just says fenced in and screened.
Yeah.
That's where I run into the problem with 3205. But, it's not clear from here if the fencing is to act solely as the screening, or if it's fenced in to, keep people out of it. Otherwise, why doesn't it just say screened?
Well, let me ask this question. Currently, you have like a big blue dumpster.
Recycling and a trash.
Okay, and then there are the compost totes. Are those still there?
Well, I just started the district on July 1st, so I'm not and my son has been out of the school for a few years, so I don't recall where the totes are. I suspect they're
I recall having dropped my daughter off for years and throwing my banana peels away, that the compost was located on the corner of the building closest to School Street, right there. There were some compost.
Yeah, there was a couple of.
They had been there, I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know
and have
about now.
those been moved effectively? Because in some
I-
case, I wanted to
right
find
now-
a universe.
Yeah.
So right now, the compost totes are going closer to the cafeteria, which makes sense. And so we're really just talking about the two big blue dumpsters.
Which currently sit right about here, and we're gonna tuck them back here.
Okay, so they're really tucked back into a corner.
Right, right. That's within the sheep pile, so they're kind of tucked into the hillside, and the sheep pile is above that, and the hillside's above it, so they are screened pretty well on all sides, except possibly coming down the street right there, where Andrew's pointing out.
Well, and let me ask, is there going to be any type of screening trees or such planted, or, I mean, there's existing trees in that side yard, right?
Correct.
So,
Through here.
Right.
so it's not as if there's a straight visual shot, and what you're suggesting is it's even tucked in, because it is visually
Yeah.
apparent, and it's, I think one of the issues of the fencing and screening, as I understood it, was to give these kind of outdoor things a place, which is so that there is a dumpster area as opposed to a general dumpster area that gets moved around, and I think I've seen those dumpsters move around quite a bit. And so what you're suggesting is they will have a home, a tucked-in corner and nook there, and they'll be screened from the street by the trees and by the side of the hill.
Yeah.
They have a home now, right?
Well, they have a movable home. They kind of have a pad, right? They're
Yeah.
they're just sort of
And it's going to be the same thing, but moved backwards.
But tucked back in behind, tucked back now into a corner that we're creating that's 7 feet tall on the backside of them.
That is more defined than what's currently there?
Yeah.
Okay. The language of the zoning ordinance that it must be fenced in and screened from the street sounds like a fence requirement to me. I'm sorry to say, but the plain reading of it is sounding that way. I mention that in part because I'm having a hard time visualizing the tucking of dumpsters and whether and how that will be effective, but
I have a question to that end. Is there a practical way to have fencing without making it difficult to get in and out? Because I think there's also that sort of rational test, right? Can it function where it is and have some fencing from that road?
I would say that, and Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, if we were required to put a functional fence around there, I think we'd have to push that retaining wall back. This area would have to go back this way and over this way to afford us a little bit of maneuvering space for the dumpsters themselves. And we need to keep this area clear for the fire lane. So we may, if that was a requirement, we would end up having to push this sort of nook further into the hillside, taking that 7-foot wall to making it 10 feet wall. I mean, it's pretty steep back there, so it's not it's certainly technically doable, but then we're really creating a nook in the hillside for these.
Which is, I could see that being problematic. And that retaining wall, remind me, what you're doing is bolstering something that's already there, and so you'd be constructing something new.
This area? No. No, there's
I see.
actually no retaining wall
Oh,
right
I
here.
see. So you're
That's
putting
how
in
we're
that.
creating that nook is.
So
By pushing things
Yeah,
back
so the point of this
already.
was to get the dumpsters kind of out of the view, basically, and tuck them in the corner, which is partial screening. I think Andrew's right, if we push back further, we're gonna start building a taller wall. And also, I think then we start getting a little tighter on movements to get the trash truck in there, so, because we're kind of he can sweep in there right now with the way it is. As you pull that back further, it gets a little more awkward.
Yeah, because he needs
when they do this, I suspect they're gonna have to kind of get in there and
A little bit
jostle it
of
around a
jockey.
little bit before they're kind of.
Are there fire lane considerations in that corridor?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you have a limitation as to how far out that can come?
And I'm guessing, Paul, that that's pretty much the minimum right there.
Yeah, the direction from the fire chief and the assistant fire chief was basically, don't make it any worse, and which we've actually made it slightly better. I think we're at 16. That's where if you put the fence in, I think you'd be really kind of tightly constraining that, whereas there's a little flexibility moving the dumpsters around and that, within that rectangle we've shown.
And a practical, and I'll speak freely here, in a practical sense of that is a tight corner. And when we start plowing in there, and no matter what we put in there, it's going to get damaged. And as I say, for me, I'd rather push the custodial staff to have a nice, clean dumpster area.
The only place that you can see the dumpster, is it from the northern part, from the road, or can you also see it from Hubbard Street as well?
From up here, Hubbard?
Yeah.
No, I don't think. Yeah, I don't. Maybe
From
you
being
could.
up on the elevation when looking down on
With
it?
the amount of trees in there, I don't think you'd see
Okay.
it.
Yeah, no, I don't think you'd see
You're
it
wrong.
here. You wouldn't see it coming on School Street, right? Yeah, School
Right, that
Street,
neighbor wouldn't
you wouldn't
see
see
it.
it there.
No.
You try heading this way. Yeah, coming down this way, once you get past these trees and the bioretention area, are you gonna catch a glimpse of it? Absolutely.
Okay, just like that portion when you're driving by would be the only time that you really would be able to see the dumpsters. Okay.
And again, it would be a big improvement over where they are now. Right now, they kind of sit almost facing up like that, and now they're gonna be down here.
So if we read it as it doesn't have to be fence, and it was a desire to do screening, I mean, I suppose you could put a couple of shrubs in here, which would kind of break that line off. Maybe that at least you get a little advantage out of that. I don't know if that's tolerable. I think I'd rather see shrubs if it was a choice.
Yeah, a fence is,
And you're putting shrubs in the gravel wetland anyway, right?
There are plants in that and shrubs around it, and
Great. Any other questions about our dumpsters? Wanted to go over a couple of other things. What about the lighting for this project? Is there any proposed lighting?
currently, there is not. We're gonna work with what is existing. We are putting conduit in. There are five proposed lamp posts. For cost-saving measures, they've been eliminated. If they're put back into the project, we suspect that about probably January, we're going to be given a sort of go, no-go on a lot of items. Some of the play equipment in the inner courtyard, lighting, changing maybe some of the fire lane that's along the east, change it back to concrete. That'll all be stuff that the contractor, I believe, will be telling us probably, as I say, somewhere around the new year, we'll be saying, okay, you got any extra money and where do you want to spend it? At that point, if those features come back in, we'll bring it in, share with Meredith, and she can tell us what we need to do next after that.
Okay. Go ahead.
I mean, if we do it, it would be a full cutoff kind of fixture. It won't be big globes.
Right, but this time you're not proposing any new lighting. Okay. What's the timeline on this project?
we talked about that a lot in the last several months.
Construction, given your blessing, we've talked to Chris Lumber. He's okay to start on the vestibule. Our site contractor is meeting with our contractor for the vestibule to start laying out site layout with regards to continuing to have access to the kitchen and all that. They're ready to go to start the vestibule next week. ECI, our site contractor, is hoping to take advantage of the Columbus Day long weekend when the kids aren't on campus for 4 days to actually start doing some of the heavy lifting, especially close to the building. And I think the idea is that they want to get most of the heavy lifting done before the ground freezes, such that when they come back in the spring, it's more a matter of, for lack of a better term, finishes, sidewalks, roads, plantings. And the only deadline at this point that I personally care about is opening day of school next spring, or next fall. We're going to keep it closed all the way through, let the plants and grasses take hold, and like I said, August 29th or whatever it is.
Okay. And so part of your timeline is definitely affected by how soon or not soon this approval comes out.
Yeah.
Is that really for the vestibule, or would site plan as well?
I mean, I think we'd all like to know that we're comfortable moving forward with the entire project. I think this is our last hurdle.
Well, that's actually the question I wanted to ask. I'm glad you provided the answer to it, which is that is this the last hurdle, or are there other approvals that?
I don't believe so. I mean, we've got our stormwater. Chris has okayed the vestibule. This is it. I've asked that question several times to everybody. But this is, as I understand it, this is the last one. I think we do, when we do connect with the stormwater, we have to meet with Tom, and I think there's another approval there, but I think that's nitty-gritty stuff.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Does anyone have any other questions? All right.
Well, actually, I've been curious, are you taking into account all of the sledding down the hill? Because that's all I could think about with the slope is that, all I remember the kids on trays, I think. I can only imagine what damage that does.
I don't know.
That was a consideration. I
Oh, okay.
Been involved, but the sledding on, there's expectation that would still occur here. I've been talked out of doing a stone line collection swell here.
Yes, smart.
For that reason.
Good.
I guess in case your lunch tray disappeared.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Anything further? What's the pleasure of the board? Do you want to take it into deliberative session, or do you wish to make a motion now?
Motion to take it under advisement, or
Into
deliberative
Okay, and close the evidence?
close the evidence, yes.
Okay.
So moved.
Motion by Tom to close the evidence and move this into deliberative session. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Kate. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of closing the evidence and moving into deliberative session, please raise your right hand. Thank you all very much for
Thank you,
your
guys.
very
Thank
thorough
you.
presentation.
If you need anything, let us know.
You said you had additional stormwater permits that weren't in the application packet?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think since I alluded to those, I'm assuming that doesn't count as new evidence.
No.
No.
Yeah, 2 operational permits here, and then this is the landscape architect's
Okay,
comments
awesome
we
that you
talked
read.
about.
Thank you
Appreciate
so
it.
much. Perfect.
Thank you for your help on guiding us through this process.
Thank you for getting us what we asked for.
The last item tonight?
You are. So,
Some other business, though.
do. So let me just make that announcement, and then I'll take a motion to adjourn into deliberative session. The only other business is that our next regular meeting is Monday, September 17th, 2018. Anybody have any other new business they wish to raise? Otherwise, I'll take a motion to adjourn into a deliberative session. Motion by Kevin, second.
I'll second it.
Second by Deb. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please raise your right hand. We are adjourned. Thank you all very much.